Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Steve Jewell with Community Giving. We're really excited for today's webinar and really excited and glad to have so many people with us today. I think we have over 100 people who've registered, and we have a few groups that are out there watching collectively as a team and a few communities. And so we'll give everybody a chance to log in and get connected here. But we want to thank you for spending some time with us today and talking about a really important topic. As you know, Community Giving, our overall mission is engage people, connect resources, and build community. And we're into our second year of doing webinars. Prior to COVID, we had not done one webinar. Now, since all of us have been learning how to do these and stay connected with each other, we have found it's been a great way to be able to tap the expertise of people from not only across Minnesota, but actually around the country. And it helps us all be better as organizations and helps us be better as communities. And so we are just thrilled and excited to have so many people who've registered and who are part of today's webinar. This session will also be recorded. So if for some reason you have to if you have to leave the webinar, you can get a copy of the recording so you can hear it afterwards. Also, we do have a number of people who register just hoping to be able to watch it after the fact as well. So I just want to thank you for coming and spending some time with us again today. You know, the series this year, as our team here at Community Giving sat down and talked about where we're at, the state of communities, this whole idea of placemaking. How do we make communities and create communities where people want to live and grow and thrive? Just continues to be so important in where we're at today as a country. And so we had a variety of our team members have heard our guest speaker today speak, and they said that she would be the perfect one to kick off this series that we're planning. We're planning 4 over the course of the next year. And again, we're very excited. So as we go through, as always, please put your questions in the Q&A tab and we'll get to them. We'll have time for that. But to introduce our speaker today and to get us started, I'd like to introduce Carl Samp. He is the Executive Director of the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation. And I'd like to turn it over to Carl to introduce today's speaker. Carl?
Great, thank you, Steve. And thanks everyone for joining us, and especially Catherine for beaming in from Virginia today. So we're glad you're with us. I had the good fortune of seeing Catherine present at the St. Paul Riverfront Conference back in 2013, where she talked about this topic. And I was very impressed by it. It really shaped kind of how we set some of our priorities around our grant making to develop, attract, and retain a quality workforce. And I think you'll see today how that fits in. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Catherine. For over a decade, Dr. Katherine Loflin, through her global brand of the City Doctor, has been an award-winning, internationally recognized trailblazer on place attachment, or what makes people love their city and why it matters to economic vitality and individual well-being. She is the global authority in this area and has been widely featured through the press. Her book, Place Match, her former radio show, TEDx Talks, and her groundbreaking placemaking research and initiatives around the world. Catherine has been awarded the International Placemaking Award and has given keynotes for organizations including Gallup, the United Nations, the Asia Pacific Mayors Forum, the National Association of Realtors, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. She's been invited to serve on global placemaking councils in Australia, Sweden, France, Canada, Qatar, and the US. She's also CEO of television production and development for the Brian Hamilton Foundation, leading the foundation's television projects currently on the air and in development. In this role, Dr. Loflin is an executive producer of the show Free Enterprise, currently running nationally on ABC, 10:30 in the morning on Saturdays, by the way, which features Brian's work with the formerly incarcerated in starting their own businesses. The show is in its first season and has received multiple awards for social impact and has been renewed for a second season. Congratulations, Catherine. As an extension of her global place attachment brand, Dr. Loflin co-founded and is principal of Amazing Place Productions, a production company that tells the stories of cities through original stage productions and innovative place-based events. The company was honored by North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper through a proclamation naming June 23rd as Tell Your Place Story Day in North Carolina. Her original productions and events are high demand, profit-making ventures that have received national and statewide awards and recognition. Her latest project is for her hometown of Cary, North Carolina. She is the playwright for Cary, the Stories, which spans 300 years of Cary's history and lesser-known stories and will be staged in 2022. Previously, Dr. Loflin was the program director of the Knight Foundation in Florida, where she was responsible for guiding Knight's charitable investment of millions of dollars annually into their 26 U.S. communities. Dr. Loflin received her master's and PhD in social work from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution and invited inductee to the Order of First Families of North Carolina. So, Katherine, thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I have a special place in my heart for community foundations because it was one of the things that I took care of at Knight Foundation. I ran our community foundation initiative in our 26 communities, and that, along with my background in social work, really put them in the heart of a lot of how I think about places, because I feel like community foundations, when they are really optimized, they are the ones who are really the conveners and the people that allow thoughts and conversations and investments to come from a very local expertise source, which is the community foundation. And so we were, as some of our community foundations from Knight Foundation might remember, if you're on the call, we went from sort of an ATM model, is what we called it, of donor advised funds, money in, money out, to how can we position our community foundations as place leaders? How can we allow them to be more of the go-to of expertise about the community? And of course, they get their expertise by keeping their ear to the ground and staying in touch with the community versus, and I'm sure these conversations are still continuing, a Vanguard or another organization who claims to have donor advised funds, but they don't have that local expertise that only a community foundation can provide. So I feel like that the work around place attachment really should be at the heart of a lot of community foundation work, because there is so much of learnings that can go back and forth with that model. So let's go ahead and get started. When you're talking about place attachment, see, this is what happens when you hire a shrink to do a webinar. They're going to throw Maslow at you pretty quick. What we want to first focus on to ground the conversation in attachment is to understand how critical it is to human development. We don't think about this as much as we should, but right after food, water, shelter, and safety, the next thing we as humans really require is a sense of belonging and attachment, that we love and people love us, that we have meaningful relationships with people and places because they tell us messages back to ourselves that make us better to move up to the next thing, which is esteem and ultimately self-actualization, being the best human that you can be. So right from go, you have to understand that this is not a touchy-feely thing. This is really an important step for communities and their members to feel like they are always graduating up to being the best person they can be. And having a fit with your environment is a key part of that. Now, on top of the psychology, what we've seen, and I always have to update this slide because we're learning new things all the time, that place is becoming even more important. Now, before the pandemic, we were seeing unbelievable charts of places really driving the decisions that people were making about whether they're going to stay at a company or they're going to leave, they're going to own a house, they're going to rent a house. A lot of those economic choices are driven by how much people feel connected and love where they live. It's no more just about, well, I'm happy with my job and I'll deal with this place. It's really about, I love this place, so I'll deal with my job. But we've seen some things come forward that really have changed the conversation around place. Number one, and I think probably the most important, if you're thinking about economic development, you're thinking about reducing brain drain, you're thinking about talent recruitment and retention, is this idea of young talent has changed the conversation. We have now almost a second generation of people, young people, who will choose a place over a job. Now, if you think back to your grandparents, my grandparents, it didn't work like that. You go where the work was and you just figured it out. Well, the conversation is completely changed now with this one data point of young people saying, I want to live where I want to live, and I want the job to support my life, but I'm not going to live to work. We have to have this balance where I love my place as well as I love my job. But if push comes to shove, it is really that love of place that drives a lot of those decisions about where where they will go. That's why you hear this terrifying thing for parents where young people just show up in a community and figure out the job when they get there because they just want to be a part of that environment. So when you talk about a global competition for talent, this really starts to make sense about why place matters even more. Now, during and after the pandemic, I'm just now completing probably the only attachment research that has to do with during COVID. And what we are seeing is now place is even more important because we're learning that we can do our jobs from anywhere. Many of us can, not all of us, a lot of service organizations cannot, but a lot of this global competition for talent, there is now an open space where place can really play even more. Job satisfaction. So probably starting around 2008, we started seeing this trend where people who report job satisfaction relate their feelings about a place in that determination. So basically what I'm saying is that the line between place and workplace started to become very blurred. And people were coming into their boss's office quitting or wanting different things because of that connection to a place. And this really changed a lot of CEOs and HR folks that I was working with to think about, hey, we've been doing all this engagement work to engage employees, and let's have a good culture and let's have all this. We have forgotten, we did not know that once they leave our doors, what happens to them in the community will come back and impact how they feel about this job. So again, the relationship with place started to take more center stage, even in conversations you wouldn't think it would be, such as how do we do employee engagement? Well, we also have to be mindful of their relationship with their place. And of course, the thing that Soul of the Community is most known for is empirically tying feelings about a place to local economic growth. So going from something that many would argue is a touchy-feely idea to a hard outcome that a lot of communities are judged by. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Go ahead and jump ahead on a couple here. Also, I've heard a lot of conversations about the marketing and the branding of communities. There is a logo and there is a not a jingle, but awfully close to jingles, and trying to communicate who you are as a place as a way to market that place, not only to talent, but to each other, to visitors, things like that. So understanding better, who are we as a place? What are the things that we get right? What is our competitive advantage to our neighboring community? And how can we exploit that, both with tourism, but also talent recruitment and retention through our marketing? So it becomes authentic, which I would argue is missing from a lot of campaigns where we market communities or cities. You could see their tagline and you think that could be for anywhere. What makes that you versus any other place in the world, So I think live, work, and play has gotten a lot of use in the past 5 to 10 years, because we get the idea that we want our place to be all these things, but we don't know really how to talk about it more specifically than live, work, and play. So we see that in a lot of cities. And then this conversation around quality of life, I think even before the pandemic, but even more so now, we hear people talking about, quality of life and what we value as humans in our lives. And a lot of people talk about quality of life and have no idea, like, how do you create it? What does it mean? And I've put forth this definition of quality of life where it's not just about, do you have place quality? It's about how you feel within that. So a lot of communities, and if you look at all the lists, the best place to live and best place to do this, that, and the other thing, about 5 or 6 years ago, I had a slew of people contacting me and said, I moved to the #1 place to raise children and I hate it here. Why? I thought this worked. What is this place stuff? And the fact is that many places have the ingredients for place quality, but they manifest them in a way that makes sense for who they are as a place. Context matters. So the social offerings, for example, in New York City is way different than the social offerings in Cary, North Carolina, as it should be. So you have to go and experience the place to see how it matches with you. And that's really what's behind Place Match, the book. It's sort of a look at how finding the right place to live is a lot like finding the right partner to share your life. Because a lot of people look good on paper, you wouldn't marry them, because they don't fit for you. So really understanding how quality of life works. And then lastly, because the attachment research is still developing, I'm learning more and more all the time from kids who are mining the data of Soul of Community for their dissertations, on and on, that we're learning even more about how attachment matters to individual outcomes. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We know that in places with high levels of attachment, we have an elderly population who's more likely to seek medical care. They're more likely to be out and about, less isolation, more able to stay in their homes longer. Why? Well, because they feel comfortable in their community to go out, to socialize, to walk, to do those things that keep them from feeling the sense of isolation, which I think a lot of medical professionals, especially in older communities, and again, since the pandemic, look at isolation as really the building blocks to deterioration of outcomes. So there's that finding. There's also lower high school dropout rates in communities with high levels of attachment. So there seems to be something going on here that's even bigger than just feeling good about your place, and maybe that helps with the economic development. There seems to be human outcomes at stake as well. Oops, sorry. So let me just briefly go through what in the world is the Night Soul of the Community Project. So if you don't know, Night had 26 funding communities across the country and wanted to answer a simple question. What makes people love where they live, and why does it matter? Night is a place-based foundation, so obviously they were still trying to determine about, what should we know about the geographies of place, and how should it inform our funding? So what's good about me with this project is I worked, and I still work, with a foundation. So I understand the donor intent, and I understand the competition around priorities, and I understand all the things that we in the foundation community have to get right, because we are stewards of charitable dollars. So part of this for me is, how can I help places make meaningful investments in something that I know matters, that we probably haven't put our arms around as well as we could, because we find that it's medium squishy at best. How can I make this less squishy? So the idea behind what makes people love where they live and why does it matter is really about, at the heart, is resident attachment. So why do we care about resident attachment? Well, this is the old workplace employee engagement metric, because we know that engagement of an employee helps the bottom line of companies. That's what Gallup did a long time ago. So we were trying to say, well, is the key understanding what is attachment and what are those feelings that people have about a place that seem to drive some economics. Does it drive economics? At the time, we didn't even know. So we talked to 43,000 people over 3 years. Knight did have a funding community in St. Paul, the Twin Cities, but also in Grand Forks and some other outposts west. We aren't all located on the East Coast. It's really across the country. And our first job was really to figure out, can we measure resident attachment? Now, before then, this is 2008, there wasn't a lot of conversations about this. The most you would hear is someone talking about satisfaction. You know, the mayor's office would conduct this survey of satisfaction. How satisfied are you? And mostly it was around our services. You know, do we fill potholes and pick up the trash and do stuff like that? There wasn't really a comprehensive look at what are the bonding metrics behind attachment. And what we found is that it's a combination of things. It is outlook. How optimistic are you about the community's future? So people who are more optimistic about their city, their community, their neighborhood are more likely to be attached to it today. Communities like to be part of a winning team, and they love to become part of a comeback team. So this psychology behind what do I think my future is going to be like in this place is really important to driving the attachment they feel today. Do you recommend it as a place? Do you talk about it? Do you brag about your place? Do you feel like it is the perfect place for you? So that's that belonging thing. You know, it's not the perfect place. Somebody else might hate it here, but it feels perfect to you. There is a satisfaction component, which is, are you satisfied living here? Are you satisfied with your life here? And then there's that sense of pride. Is it something that you want to brag about to other people? Do you show pride in your yard, in your neighborhood? All of those things come together to create attachment. And those things matter at different levels. They're not equal. So for example, optimism, outlook, matters a little bit more to attachment. So one of the things we used talking about making this stuff actionable was, you know, I would always look at the outlook score because I knew it drove attachment a little bit more than the recommending. Do you recommend your place? Which I found very interesting. So when I went on the almost 26 community tour to share these findings, I would ask folks like, what's going on with recommending? And you guys might guess, being community foundations, but what I heard over and over from places is like, we love it here and we don't want anybody else to know it. we don't talk about it. You know, the first rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. So the recommendation came from a selfish motivation that mattered a little bit less to attachment. There was a self-preservation vehicle at play there. So even if you understand what is attachment, you know, what do we measure in people? Now, remember, these are perceptions. If I came to a community and said, hey, you guys need to work on your outlook and your sense of pride, good luck with that. It would not help you know how to make investments, right? So what we tried to figure out is, okay, what are the things about a place that drive those feelings? What are the goals? Do some things matter more than other things about a place? And we measured 10 to 11 aspects of a place, everything from the leadership to basic services to affordable housing, all of that stuff. And what we found was that it was the softer sides of place that drove feelings of attachment. Now, that might not sound surprising given the context I've just given you, but it was surprising because so many places had measured their quality of life based on potholes or garbage, which are important, but people kind of expect that everywhere. What makes them fall in love with a place is that they have a sense of social offerings. There are things to do in the community that they enjoy. They have a sense of pride and enjoyment around the aesthetics. And I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit. And there's a sense of welcoming and a level of openness that feels appropriate to the place. And when people rate those things highly, there seems to also be higher levels of attachment, which brought us to the third correlation, which is the attachment level between resident attachment and GDP growth seem to be related. What does that mean? That means not that rich places feel better about being rich places and people love it there, but that there was a metric of growth of GDP in places that had higher levels of attachment. So as we continue on, you'll see there's a theory of change I've been working on, but I'm sure you can guess what happens where those two things could be related. I'll give you a couple of hints. The first is when people feel more attached to the place, they see their future tied to the place's future. So they engage in it differently. It's the difference, and I talk about this in the book because it works. It's the difference between dating someone, meeting someone and dating them, and being married to them. Because you know your outcome is kind of tied to that person's outcome. If you're dating, if you're not, yeah, maybe you care, but it's different when you're married, right, to that outcome, or you're in partnership with someone committed over time. So that causes people to do things differently. Another thing that happens is they're more likely to buy houses. They're more likely to start their business. They're more likely to put roots down. And kind of interestingly, they're more likely to invite people to come visit them. And all of these things have economic impacts not too far down the line. So Soul of the Community really changed the conversation around, number one, can we measure attachment? Yes, we can. Can we figure out what are the things that most matter for attachment? Yes, we can. And what does attachment matter for? A lot. So the social offerings, the aesthetics, the openness, those were the top 3 drivers of attachment everywhere we studied, all 26 places, all 3 years. So that means in Macon, Georgia, in Charlotte, in St. Paul, Duluth, in Grand Forks, in Long Beach, in Detroit, in Miami. It was always the social offerings, aesthetics, and openness that was driving these feelings of attachment. So where people loved those things, there was higher levels of attachment. So let me just talk very briefly about what social offerings is as we measured it. And as it's continued to be measured, we feel even more comfortable with we're measuring the right things here. The number one thing that drives attachment in 26 places with Soul of the Community was social offerings. So if you could only invest in one thing, it was the ability for people to have things to do that they like. So for us, social offerings are the formal entertainment infrastructure, the downtown, the festivals, the concerts, all of those like pre-programmed things that you can do in a community. But it's also the informal things as well. It's how easily could you, what I call choose your own adventure in a community that weekend. So you don't want to do a festival, especially these days. How easy is it to do wayfinding in your downtown? Is there maps and ways for people to like discover their community on their own? And there's always something going on that they can get involved in. That's social offerings. So it's the formalized and the informal. The other thing about social offerings that's really important is we found that civility matters. So for example, in a place like Miami, where I lived for 10 years and being a North Carolina girl, culture shock didn't even begin to cover it. But you know, they have tons of stuff to do when you talk about the formal and the informal of social offerings, tons to do. But when you get in those spaces, for me, a North Carolina girl, I felt like I was in a pinball machine and I was the ball. I mean, it was, you know, what do you mean I don't park my own car? What do you mean, does my parking space want to be rolled into my mortgage? It was a lot, it was different. So it was harder for me. And because of that, what we found in the data is when people go into those environments and they're not happy, it pulls down their perception of social offerings. So my point is, you don't just build social offerings to turn everything into a bungee jump Disneyland without thinking about the management of those offerings. Because if people go in there and are miserable, they won't do it again. It doesn't matter. And in other places like Grand Forks is a great example, where there was high levels of civility, not a lot of stuff to actually do at the time, but the civility sort of people make their own connections if they feel comfortable to do so. So the sweet spot is the availability of those kinds of formal and informal, while always keeping in mind the importance of managing those spaces, and the civility appropriate to the level of the community expectation is happening there. And I spend a little more time on social offerings because it really is important. Now, again, going back to this latest research we did in Corpus Christi during the pandemic, social offerings obviously is no longer the #1 driver for attachment in Corpus Christi. We studied 3 counties in that area because there's no social offerings, right? So what we found, and it's interesting, is that social capital, which is individual networks, which usually didn't drive attachment very much at all in the soul model, because it was about personal one-on-one networks. This social offerings mattered more. Social capital and social offerings has basically switched. So you see people gravitating and holding on to individual connections the best way they can during times of a pandemic, which is obviously not surprising, but new data, definitely for sure. Aesthetics. So having a sense of pride in your community has everything to do with, do you feel a sense of dignity when you look around? Aesthetics is the natural and the man-made structures that create a sense of place visually. If you think about it, aesthetics is the first and most consistent message a place sends about itself to everyone who's in it. There was some really interesting studies about, 15 years ago, looking at the number of blight you see on your way to work, just driving in your normal commute, and how it affects you on the job, and how it affects your own self-worth. Aesthetics matters. And aesthetics is also one of these things where you can scale it, because I have done this research at a very local neighborhood level. I've looked at very wealthy communities. I've looked at disadvantaged communities at the very neighborhood level, and aesthetics still matters. So even if it's just, we keep our yard clean and we hang baskets, or it's a very grandiose downtown park whiz bang, it's very important that aesthetics stays in that conversation, because it matters to human dignity. And where people feel dignified, they also feel a sense of attachment to the place that provided that sense of dignity to them. And so aesthetics was number 2 in driving attachment, I should say that, everywhere. And then number 3, everywhere, was openness, a sense of welcoming. And openness in the way we measured it really looks at how well can anybody come in and live a life in your community. Openness is obviously an area that a lot of our communities struggled with. Because we look at such a comprehensive measure. It's not just the historically disenfranchised groups, but we do, of course, ask about minorities, immigrants, gays and lesbians, all of those traditionally marginalized groups. But we also asked people about, did they think it was a welcoming place for young talent? For seniors? So across the life cycle, if you will. And it's very interesting how innovatively people send messages about openness to their residents, and you don't even think about it. The size of a sidewalk, that says, can a mother with a stroller or a young talent on a bike, or an older lady in a scooter, can she get to that park? That's so wonderful that you've built everything, you've invested in so heavily. Can they get there? That sends a message about openness. Do you really want me here? Is what openness comes to the table and asks you. And it's more than tolerance. So I have a whole thing on tolerance, because this is not about tolerance. Because if you think about it, tolerance is still a power differential. I am going to be okay with you here. Isn't that nice of me? You know, it's very much I tolerate you versus welcoming. Welcoming has to do with, do you feel a sense of belonging here? That's derived not because somebody granted it to you or not, but because it just is. You feel comfortable in your own skin in this place, not because anyone decreed it for you, but because you feel that sense of belonging. So it's more powerful than tolerance, which is why a lot of communities struggled with this. And briefly, I want to share, this gets a little too data pointy, but it brings me to a funding implication for soul of the community and attachment that I want to make sure and share with you. For every community I worked in, still, I create what I call the strengths and opportunities maps. And that is a way by which I sort of scatter plot, according to your data of your community, what were the drivers? How did they come out in this matrix? So let me be specific. So how important they are for attachment and belonging, and how well you think you're doing on it. So I just said social offerings, aesthetics, and openness was very important, most important for in driving attachment and belonging in a place. Well, that's only useful data for philanthropic investment if you know how you're doing on those things, right? So we could also know how well were they rated by the individual community member. And what that creates for you is a workable roadmap for funding solutions, where you would get what we need to focus more on, I think, still in community practice, which is starting with your strengths. When I would roll into Detroit in 2009 to give them their findings at the public library in downtown, the entire audience was just ready to kill me, because they had so many people coming in and studying them, and the Newsweek articles, and Detroit's awful, and everybody, it's a terrible place to be, that when you can start a community conversation with something nobody ever talks to them about, which is what they're getting right as a place. So I could go into Detroit and I could say, hey, this isn't just my opinion. The data, the community members themselves see you as very strong in social offerings and in openness. You know, we need to work on, at the time, the aesthetics. And when you start from a position of strength, people are almost automatically listening harder, because you've given them something to believe in about themselves that they can leverage to work on the things they're not getting well. So that leaves us to the opportunities. Opportunities are the things that matter for attachment, but people aren't rating them as highly. And then we have this whole grayed out area called lower priority areas, which is usually where communities spend most of their time. There's trash collection is down there, and potholes and things like that. Not that those things aren't important. It's just that people kind of expect a level of service in every community they live in. So what's gonna make them drop down roots and create a life is not trash collection. It's going to be the softer sides of place. So it would enable us to sort of lower prioritize those other things if you are doing a place-making intervention initiative. We got to go above the line. We got to figure out our strengths and how can we leverage them to deal with the things that we are not doing as well. And one other thing I will say about this model, my dissertation was in social capital and civic engagement. Robert Putnam was on my committee. I mean, I've very much, worshiped at the altar of social offering, social capital and civic engagement, but it takes a long time to build and is very easy to destroy because it's so related to that one-on-one trust component. Attachment works differently. If you can change a community's opinion about one aspect of social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, you can see within 12 to 18 months changes in attachment. So it's not one of those things where you got to invest and hope eventually something comes from it. Changing perceptions around those three key community areas makes people start to feel differently, not immediately, but by the time I go to collect the data again, you would see opinions of social offerings going up and attachment going up, so that they would really move together in a relatively quick way. So all of this data, so when we finished Soul of the Community 2010, which is a long time ago, the initial study, everybody got the memo about social offerings, aesthetics, and openness. And I was like, great, everybody got the memo. Well, here's the downside. People were just doing social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, and they weren't paying attention to what I talked about before, which is the context of the place. Because how social offerings happens in your community, how aesthetics works in your community is unique to your community. And when you combine all those things together, so think about an initiative that combined social offerings, aesthetics, and welcoming, openness, belonging. Those are the kinds of initiatives that we, in placemaking, in my opinion, we want to be doing, where all of those levers are tripped. It's not just, well, this is our social offering over here, and this is our aesthetic over here, really combining those things together. And in those moments, you see the DNA of a place working if you've done it right. But unfortunately, what was happening is people were like, oh, that worked in that place, we'll just drop it down here and make it work in ours. And lo and behold, it did not. So you still have to do the hard work of knowing your place, because places are unique. They are unique. This is not one size fits all. There are cultures in communities that shape social offerings, how you wait in line, whether you talk to people at the grocery store or not. This all impacts the way that these ideas will live or die if you execute them. How well have you accommodated for the culture, for the values of your place? Like, I live in Cary, North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh. We are always ranked as one of the top places to whatever. And it's wonderful. I love it. But this is my community. We're not perfect, and we certainly have what I would call bless your heart moments, such as we can't handle snow, and this was our belt line a couple of years ago when we got 2 inches of snow and people were wandering the streets, and wandering the belt line, and children slept in their schools that night because their parents couldn't get them. As you can see, why we can't. It's not our culture. We are never going to be a place where you want to be driving when it's snowing. I'm just going to tell you, one flake, we're closed for a month, and that's just the way it is. And we have a lot of transplants coming in to North Carolina, and they want to help us drive in the snow. And they offer free seminars to help us drive in the snow, and no one comes. Because if you came here, North Carolina, there are some things you got to sort of put up with. You can't come here and then kill the goose that lays the golden egg. You love that we're, a great place. And then you got to take the good with the bad. Or at least you have to feel like you're motivated enough to help us with the bad. We might not accept the help because it might be our culture to just sort of say, no, we just sit at home with no power and canned goods until February, and that might be what we do. But the narrative of a place, both the good things and the bad things, really help create who you are. Now, this is tongue in cheek, but there are some real moments in communities where people don't like things about their place, and it might be part of the narrative. A lot of these things around openness are ingrained in the narrative just over time. Diversity and feelings about diversity. I remember in St. Paul, gosh, this was a long time ago, so it might not still be true, but I was doing a community conversation around soul data, and one community member said, and I thought it was very eloquent. She was like, I would like to think we would be really good with diversity of all different kinds of people. This was like 2007, all different kinds of, but I'm kind of glad we're not tested on that. So there's this feeling that I would hope we would be okay, but I'm kind of okay that it's not happening. There's underbellies to narratives that you have to at least be accountable about and address. So where do sources of narrative come from? Well, they come from a lot of different places. I'm just checking my time. Yeah. And the history of the place, which is one of my personal favorites. The geography. Are you at the mountains and the coast in between? What are the industries that really give you a claim to fame? What is the spirit of the place? Is this an up by your bootstraps kind of place? Is it a different kind of place? Who are the anchor institutions, the landmarks? So knowing kind of these things drive your feelings about the narrative of the place. What is our story? And because of that being so important, I wanted to give just a couple of placemaking examples before I leave, and we move on to doing some Q&A. So in 2008, in Macon, Georgia, they went through the soul of the community. Obviously, they were one of the night communities. And one of the things that they had noticed even before that was that they were really struggling with bridging social capital, which is obviously people having friendships and networks across racial, economic, educational areas. And they were like, how could we bring a place together in a way that doesn't feel like punitive? I ran Knight's race relations priority as well as the civic engagement priority. And one of the things I learned very early is the best way to get bridging social capital underway in a community is not to get everybody to sit in a room and talk about, the problems and the differences. It's about what are the things that all of these groups agree on and giving them a task around that. Let's not talk about like what is going on here. Let's create bonds with each other that transcend whatever preconceived notions we have about each other. So making money was an opportunity for the community to make its own money, which when I talk about this internationally, I say, which we do in our country, we just make more. But Macon came up with its own money, and they divided the currency in half. So you can sort of see a line down the middle there. And they distributed the money to different areas of the community. And the goal was to find your match. So you wanted to match the half of the community icons in the middle. And it was very popular, very popular. And when you found your match, they had events, they had downtown events, people were doing it in church and in shopping centers. I have, tree, pillar, butterfly, trying to find their match. And when you found it, you could decide whether you wanted to split the money. You met somebody you may or may not have known, split the money or go in together and use it at a locally owned business. So it had that buy local, shop local component to it as well. It won an international award for gaming. As a very innovative at the time community game. But we saw the bonding and the bridging social capital start to change just because we gave people an interesting way to meet others. But now there's lots of programs of having dinner at people's houses and all of these things that are designed to push social offerings to help us with openness, to help us with that belonging. And you've heard this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I have found that telling a community's story back to itself is the quickest way I have ever seen to change attachment levels in an hour and a half. You tell people the story of their place through an original production, and you cast it innovatively, you put your mayor in the show, and you get community people who may not be actresses or actors to be in the show. And people absolutely, I wouldn't keep doing it if I didn't see that it really changed the dynamic of places quickly. And it also, lo and behold, puts arts a little more front and center as being important for building attachment beyond art exhibitions, but live theater, live community events in downtown where the founder of your city walks amongst you in character and tells you a little bit about your place. But they also make money, which has been a big surprise, I think, to communities, because for the most part, placemaking is not really thought about as a revenue generating kind of project, but it can be. It really can be. And then that can benefit arts, culture. It can benefit the community. It can go to the coffers of the town. You know, it can really be done in a way that brings money back into the community, and also, by the way, helps with tourism. The last example I'm going to give today is actually out of Newfoundland. It's one of my escape cities, I call them. If things get too bad ever here, you will find me in Newfoundland or Australia. But Newfoundland had this very innovative approach to telling the story of a place in a very more micro level than my production company would do. And that is, they created what they call story maps. And they dotted them. You can see where in the map little thing at the bottom, you can see where people could find where these little story maps were. And when you got there, because they didn't have great internet at the time, and they had to use the old phone. So what they did is they put a sign that says "here about here," and there would be a phone number. And you would dial the phone number and you would hear the story from a resident voice, which if you've ever heard the Newfoundland, and I don't say that right, I'm supposed to say, understand Newfoundland. That's the way I'm supposed to say it. They told me this a lot. And you would hear a story from a resident about the significance of that moment, that place that you're standing on. And sometimes this was where the first settler arrived, da, 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 da. Sometimes it was like my mom and dad, there used to be a record store here, and this is where my mom and dad met. And there's something powerful about hearing it in a resident voice, that beyond oral histories, and you go to the library and you have to sit there, you stumble across these things. And that's one of the things about good placemaking, is that you don't make people come to you. You go where they are and design initiatives. That's why a lot of my productions are outside, and they're at the park, and they're at the festival. But here, you're walking downtown and you stumble across the story, and then you forever think differently of that particular space. So just in conclusion, we'll move on to Q&A. What we talked about today was the importance of, if you want to do placemaking work, it is really a combination of focusing on social offerings, aesthetics, and openness. And those things still matter. Now, social offerings might be a little different now, in that it's more about social capital as we are in a pandemic. I was going to say re-emerging, but not all of us definitely are. But that has to be coupled with understanding of place narrative. Who are you as a place? Because that's the only way good placemaking manifests. And when you do good placemaking, you get this thing that we're shooting for called attachment. And when you get attachment, you have resident outcomes, economic outcomes, and individual place outcomes as well. So it helps across the board, across the community, which is why placemaking, when done right, is a systemic intervention. It's not just in public places or in the downtown or in the parks. It's in the neighborhoods. It's the way we build new houses. Do we set up our houses with workable front porches, or do we not? Are apartment complexes microcosms of places where people can get these needs met in the development of the communities themselves? So it's not just the big picture, it's the little picture as well. And that, to me, is how you make people fall in love with where they live. And with that, I think I am going to be ready to take on questions, Sarah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Loflin, for all of that great information. We do have a couple of questions that have come in via the Q&A tab that I'm going to get to in a moment, and a couple that have chatted directly to me. So we're going to start with those. The first is, can you tell us, the people who are listening today are community foundation leaders, but they are also folks who work alongside community foundations as our partners in community around community change. So one of the questions was, what is the smallest size community that participated in Soul of Our City?
The smallest was probably Milledgeville, Georgia. And I would have to look. I don't know what Milledgeville's population is, but at the time it was under 30,000. And we we broke our communities down between large, medium, and small was less than 30,000. And we had a collection of, I think, 5 communities that were that small. And in fact, the thing about small communities that I love is that when you do initiatives there, you can see change quicker. Okay, so Milledgeville has 18,000 people. So these communities can be very small. I did a placemaking workshop in the Yukon where 8 people came to my workshop, and I was like, great, what community do you represent? And they said, no, we are the community. There's 8 people who live here. I mean, this is the Yukon. So these things do scale down. And basically, we talked about how they're going to change their backyard configuration so that there's more of a town, a street square, a town square for them. So it is very scalable, and the small communities actually can be a lot more nimble in applying these things than even the medium to large size communities can.
Thank you for that. The second question is, are any of the tools that were embedded into Soul of Our City, are they available in open source or ways that communities now can use them to do some mapping, particularly around assets or strengths or opportunities?
Yes, so Knight still the Soul of the Community website. It's soulofthecommunity.org. You can find findings and resource kits, some things in there that would help in having conversations around that. I have also developed worksheets around each of the drivers, social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, that really encourage people to start drilling down to their city and thinking about their place in conjunction with that. I find that if you're going to go do a breakout session on these areas, people need something to work with and react to. So we would do a series of breakout sessions, and I've heard from some of you that are planning on doing something like this, and I'm going to give some quick advice on it. Do a breakout session on social offerings, do a breakout session on aesthetics, do one on openness, and then do another one on narrative. Please, you have to have a conversation about how does this manifest for our narrative? And then you need one final breakout session where you say, okay, here are the ideas that we cultivated in each of these sessions. How do we bring them all together? Because that is really where the rubber meets the road in coming up with placemaking ideas that hit social offerings, aesthetics, and openness, and be mindful of the narrative as you're developing those ideas. So it's really, and I can make those available to everyone on this call as well, that you can adapt and use for your community as you see fit.
Great. A follow-up question from someone is, ideally, who should be at the table when you're having these kinds of breakout session conversations? Should it be elected officials, funders, the community developers, just anybody?
Yeah. So here's my number one tip on this. Be very mindful of what you can actually do in a community when you are having these conversations. The number one mistake we make in community engagement, because the first thing I'm going to say is, well, you have to have the people, like not the leaders, but the people. You need to have a session of the people. If and only if you are very clear with them up front about what's possible to change and what's not possible to change. So for example, a lot of community engagement work that not just community foundations, but everybody does. Towns do this all the time, is they like, tell us what you'd like downtown to look like. And it's this very open, when we all know well that 80% of it is dictated by the pipes and the way that it's been labeled, that we can have certain things here and certain. So you give people opportunities to work on something where you can be very sure that they're going to see their work in the product. Too much we say, what do you want? And they don't see anything of themselves in the product. So my number one rule is When you bring in the community, and I would do a session with the community members and then do another session with the leaders and then combine them, because I love community leaders too, but boy, when you get them in a room, sometimes with their residents, and if they're up for election, you're going to have to sit there and be like, so let the people talk, make sure they talk about what they could actually see themselves in the change. Do a separate meeting with the leaders, and then finally bring everybody together. It should be a systemic practice where all points of the table, Chamber of Commerce, local universities, local government, local businesses, community members, students, young talent you want to keep, they're all invited. I just think the way you structure it needs to change based on who's in the room.
Thank you. All right, so we do have a couple of questions that are in the Q&A tab, and I want to remind folks they can still drop one in, and even if we can't get to it live, we can certainly try and get you some answers from Dr. Loflin. So the first question is, what is your advice for handling groups of people who love to start things like why my town is a crappy place or doesn't have anything good to happen, when this poster felt that they have been creating lots of positive efforts to create that positive, diverse, and fun narrative, but there's always this group that wants to bring us down? What would you say to that?
Yes, so here's a what I call that is the people, the stuck in placers, people who feel either for whatever reason they enjoy complaining, or they really don't like it there. They don't have the means to leave, so they have to stay stuck in a place. And stuck in place communities, even if it's a small section of the community, can be really toxic to the rest. And there are some things that you can do, I think, that are kind of creative. But the number one thing to do is not build another mousetrap to make them happy. I think when you have a community where there's a certain faction of people, and you have to be honest with yourself, is part of the narrative of your place. Like some places don't like to brag about themselves. We don't talk nicely. We other people, there is a reward for being a naysayer. It's just part of who we are. It's never going to change. It's not, there's nothing you can do about it. But what you can do is, many communities like, well, we'll just do more, we'll bid more, we'll blah, blah. What I almost look at it as is a social marketing approach, where like we're doing now with vaccinations, you create PR campaigns where it changes the conversation about, hey, did you know that we have this? Did you know that we have this? And encourage people to feel differently about a place just based on, did you know? Not punitive, not why are you never happy, not any of that. Just like, did you know? And then if people want to be like ugly about it, then it looks less rational. I hate to say it that way, but that's the truth, because there's been a public education campaign about not doing more, but talking about what more we have that you don't know about. I'll give a quick example. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, the mayor there had a similar issue. And one of the things he solved for was, he grew up there in Fort Wayne. He knew everything about it. He set up a website, which, could have gone either way. And he said, every week, I'm going to show you things in your community that I don't think you know about. This is where I went fishing as a kid. Did you know we have a fishing hole over here? Did you know this is it? And I want you to post things that you don't think I know about our community. And some of the things that were posted were like, hey, this has been blighted for 5 years. When are you going to do something about it? But what it did is it sort of brought together information in an open source where people were sharing, did you know? Changing not what was there, but people's perception about what was there. And then the naysayers will continue. But in light of that, they do look a little less rational, because you've changed the conversation about telling people what they actually have to offer. Staycations and pandemics have been great for places that offer a lot of things, because people have had to rediscover their place and know things about their place they didn't know before. And so it's harder for naysayers when you have groups of people around them that say, it doesn't really ring true to my experience here. So that's a couple of ideas on that.
Hey, Sarah, if I could interject something. This is Carl up in Brainerd. I worked with a neighborhood group up here who when they had those folks come forward, they would say, oh, will you start a task force then to address that issue and solve that? And inevitably they either did, but most often they just quit coming and complaining.
You know, I was when Mayor Nutter was the mayor of Philadelphia, he said to me something I will never forget, which is, and it's true, my job as mayor is not to attach people at any cost, because I might not be the place for everybody. And I need to be okay with that. So it's not that, oh, we're this and we're that, and whatever you need, we have, you know, that kind of approach to place isn't authentic. It's not true. Some places are not the places for everybody. They just never going to feel a fit there. And that's okay. Mayor Nutter would say, we should have a level of mobilization, residential mobilization, that we feel comfortable with. The goal is not zero residential mobilization. People don't move out of our community. I would hope if they don't like it here, they could, you know, but that's where the economics comes in. So our goal with placemaking isn't to attach everybody at any cost. Our goal with attachment is to authentically show who we are as a place, so the people who are naturally attached to that model find you and stay with you.
Thank you. Another question is, what happens when a play or a production like you're talking about the local history tells it like it is, including all the shadow parts of a community, when welcoming is the last thing that the people in charge think is important?
That's a very good question. So let me tell you how I've approached this and what I've learned. First of all, for example, with the Carrie show, I crowdsourced the writing of the show. So that means that I went to churches and I sat with families and I went through attics and I did all of these things with individual community members who wanted, I had an open call for stories. So I took the town's history. I live in the South, so your question could not be more front and center for what I was concerned about in writing any story of a Southern town. So I have the official timeline of the town. And then I found these other stories that show the community as it is. And I went to our mayor who was in the show. You know, that's another good thing to do, is you get the leadership in the show, because then believe it or not, they are much more invested in seeing it work out. But I said, you know, we're going to tell some things like it is. And the reason why is because we have the descendants of people that we're portraying on stage sitting in the audience. And I cannot, even though it's historically based fiction, I don't know exactly what happened with everything. It's important for the authenticity of your resident, who is your customer, that they see themselves on the stage in an authentic way. Now, that means that we tell the darker side of what a school shooting was like in our town, because it changed who we are. And in that moment, we don't feel we don't feel proud of who we are. But what matters is what happens after that. That's what we talk about in free enterprise. It's like when you do something wrong, you go and you pay your debt to society. But what happens after that? That's the moment for redemption. That's the tagline of the show. So I use that in really the production. So you're going to have a moment where you see your town in not a positive light. What did you do after that? Like Mr. Rogers talks about, where were the helpers? Where were the up and comers? And when you do it that way, plus you tell the leadership, you know, you have descendants, people on stage, their descendants are in the audience, or they're playing their great grandfather on stage. Usually leaders become a little more respectful of the process if they know at the end of the day, it won't be a tourism show, you know, come here and live here, but it will be a fair depiction of life in our town that helped make it what it was or what it is.
Thank you. Another question. Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? What would you advise for a community that has certain groups or bubbles with vastly different community and individual values. And how would you suggest engaging those bubbles to help them feel like a community and engage or increase their self-pride?
That's a great question as well. So two things I would recommend, and they seem to be diametrically opposed to each other, but that's where your community's narrative comes into play to see what you would do. So I often work in neighborhood levels where there are different values. Even faith-based communities, you know, they tend to live together. Immigrant communities tend to live. They don't always live throughout the community. If you have these bubbles, as you say, one of the things I've seen communities do successfully is almost create a, I know this sounds strange, but it works, signage where you show you're coming into an area, a region of different people, and we come together as a quilt, or we come together as a patchwork to create the place. So highlighting, exploiting, if you will, the differences and how it contributes to a community culture that's very different and very diverse, and being proud of that. I've seen a lot of communities do literally quilts, and each square has the representation of that town. And so they create some sort of archway when you walk into the town of that quilt being done in metal or something like that, that says, you know, we're proud of our differences, and we don't have to all become melted to still love this place. And I think that that's an important misconception around placemaking. It doesn't mean everybody becomes neutralized. Everybody can be who they are, but have the common love of that place that holds them together. Now that brings me to the second idea, which is finding the things, and I talked about this with race relations, where there is agreement across disparate groups. Like that value might be different, but we all believe in this. We all believe in our children. We all believe in education as important. We all believe in safety. We all believe in pride. We all believe in whatever. And using that, like finding that intersection where there is agreement and spending time working on projects that focus on that. Because what it does is that it helps that area get better, but it also creates organic social capital, bridging social capital, because they're not talking about their differences. They're talking about what they agree as important and are working together to try to solve that. Many community foundations have given those kinds of projects initial seed funding to really great results, not only around community problem solving, but around bridging social capital as well.
Thank you. I think the last question that we have in right now is, what would you say are the biggest challenges that you have found in communities who are trying to address this kind of work, the barriers to them being successful in implementing, particularly those top three drivers?
The number one barrier is they don't acknowledge their narrative in their work. They move on to just doing social offerings, aesthetics, and openness. The second thing I would say is that they don't think creatively across their community. So they say, oh, here's our placemaking initiative in downtown. Here's our placemaking, here's our park that we focused on placemaking. You know, there's these little pockets that they point to, but when you do it correctly, because what we're trying to do is grow attachment, it really has to be across the board. Like I said before, it's not just public spaces, it's in the community culture around attachment. So, you know, focusing on one, and this is this, and this, instead of combining social offerings, aesthetics, and openness into everything that you do, plus the narrative. The other thing that I think happens is that leaders don't believe it. They don't believe it. They don't believe that you're telling me if I focus on these softer things that are usually the first things to cut in my budget, the parks, you know, the cleanups, you're telling me that if I invest in that and I don't focus on this other stuff as much, it's going to make a difference in the life of my community. It sounds very kumbaya-y. And that's where you have to start showing those numbers around attachment to economic growth, because it's that statistic that got us on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't a kumbaya thing. We tied it to an economic outcome. So my advice to you is, if you have a naysaying leadership who's like, that's not the way we do things, that's sounds crazy, you start tying it. And there's more and more data on this now, where the feelings of attachment are related to the economic outcomes. And you will be surprised, people you couldn't, drop off at a meeting will show up on their own, because they're looking for innovative ways to attract and retain talent and grow economics. And place is now squarely at the table in making that possible.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Loflin, for sharing all of your expertise and your insights. I'm already getting lots of texts and everything from folks who are watching saying they're really looking forward to digging deeper into the work. And our follow-up series will examine each of those top 3 drivers in a more deliberate way in the webinar. So we may be coming back to you for some additional advice. And we just really thank you for.
I'm so excited. This work is so important, and it will change the way that your community feels optimized. And that's why I'm so energized every time a community and a group says, we want to see what we can do with this. It's very exciting.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kathy Gracco, who is the Director of Community Programs for Community Giving. And Kathy will facilitate the next portion of our series today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Loflin. So at Community Giving, our collective mission of our community foundations really do center around social capital. And because we know that communities thrive when there's a strong sense of belonging, trust, and connections that both bridge and bond people. And as Dr. Loflin referenced, is really the heart of a community. And oftentimes community foundations are tied into that work. And so I'd like to invite our executive directors of each of our foundations to share what's happening in your communities. And in that sharing, have you identified or noticed a difference in the initiatives that really capitalize on the 3 levers referenced by Dr. Loflin related to aesthetics, social offerings, and openness? So I'll start with Holly at our Alexandria Area Community Foundation.
Thanks, Kathy. Hang on. I'm going to have you. I'm getting an echo because I'm in a room. Can you go to Carl and then I'll come back to me, and or is that better? Is that better? No. All right. I'm going to move, so please go to Carl.
Yep, Carl.
Here I come. Well, yeah, as I said, I saw Dr. Loflin back in 2013, and it really shaped how I thought about the work that we could do as a foundation, and kind of combine it with our workforce initiatives. But what is kind of going on here that we've been involved with at the foundation in those areas, I'm going to start with the welcoming side, because I came here about 30 years ago, and when I actually lived up here as a seasonal resident while I was in college. I worked summer jobs up here, but I worked in some other communities as well. So I was a newcomer in several different places. And out of the 4 probably places, I was kind of a temporary seasonal newcomer. I probably felt the least welcome here. So when I came back here and moved here, I kind of made a pledge that I was going to do what I could do to make it more welcoming for some other people. So I always said, when I went to work at the community college here when I first came up, and I said, people would always talk to me about fishing, but no one would take me fishing. And so one of the things when we had new employees come to the college, I would try and get them out fishing or golfing or something, and engage people. And I think that's something that everybody in a community can do to make the community more welcoming, is reach out to new people and actually do something with them and invite them over for dinner or whatever. But the other thing I knew was that my in-laws had moved here back in about 1957. And for the 36 years they were here before they passed, their closest set of friends were the Newcomers Club that they met during that time. So I knew there was real value and attachment to a social network through that. So that group had kind of died out around here in around 2010. So one of the things that we did at the foundation was we kind of re-energized the Newcomers Club here, the Greater Lakes Area Newcomers Club, and we've been supporting them with just small grants every year to provide a part-time coordinator. And we're now up to over 200 members in that. And Paula, that works here at the chamber with Matt, has been an active, taken an active role in expanding that network and just doing fun things together and introducing them to some of the amenities of our community and things like that. So that's been one thing. We also started with the support of Region 5, we started the Welcoming Communities Advocacy Group here. Working again with the chamber, we held an inclusive workplace webinar around Martin Luther King Day. It was not on it, but and we brought in a speaker who talked about how our workplaces can be more inclusive. And then DEED is since they have an initiative for inclusive workplaces. So our Welcoming Communities Advocacy Group has been supporting that initiative as well. On the aesthetic side, I think it was in 2015, we had a group.
Can I interrupt? Okay, I won't. Carl, can I interrupt you just 2 seconds? Because something which you said about openness, I absolutely have to say something about.
Great.
I love, so for example, the newcomers group is a great idea. One of the things that we've learned is you never kick anybody out of the newcomers group. We have people in our newcomers group that's been there for 15 years. They're no longer newcomers, but it creates this mentorship almost to actual newcomers. I think it's a great idea. And doing, making sure you do the field trips, groups like mine, the Historical Society, someone should be doing something that engages people and getting them out there to learn their community. The last thing I'll say about openness is I wrote a scene in the Carrie show about these IBMers coming in, these Northerners coming in to the South, and they're at a corn bin at the farmer's market, and they're both like holding up ears of corn fully with the husk on, and they start taking the husk off, and the farmer, a North Carolina guy, goes, it will cook a lot sweeter and a lot moist if you leave the husk on. And these people are like, because it's different. And so then he goes on and on about how you put the ice in the corn and you put it in the, and so my point being is that, again, with all of these drivers, there's formal ways, there's the formal, and then there's what happens at the grocery store with a newcomer. You can see someone, they don't know what they're doing, that is the moment of ambassadorship, in my opinion, also, is over the corn bin. So to speak, at the grocery store. So continue, sir.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I tell anybody that's going to the Newcomers Club or that's part of it, it's not like Costco. You don't show your newcomer card. If you want to go to an activity that sounds interesting, you go and have a good time. So, so back in 2015, there was a project going on in Brainerd that was looking. So the Mississippi River runs right through the heart of Brainerd-Baxter, and it was just an underutilized asset and resource here. We did have some public space on it. There is one Kiwanis Park there with kind of a small area, but the Rotary was starting to take some interest in doing some things there, and they eventually got more than 40 acres and created more of a natural space with trails. But our committee decided, or our community decided, we needed some sort of a riverfront park, and with an amphitheater and access to the river, kayak launches, things of that nature. And so our foundation made a 3-year planning grant to the city to take that to the level to get it ready for funding. And just this year, we did get $2.85 million from the state LCCMR funds to start the project construction on that. So I was really proud of our community, but also our foundation for taking that to the next level. And finally, in social offerings, we have a really unique thing here. We have an annual classical music festival called Lakes Area Music Festival, which brings in musicians, professional musicians from orchestras all over the world. The one before COVID hit, we had 9 countries represented, I think like 32 states, about 200 professional musicians. There was ballet, opera, and several different classical musical performances. So we've supported that every year and we'll continue to do that. And then through our discretionary grant making, I've got about a 10,000 budget there, and we just support numerous little community music in the park, arts in the park, those kind of activities in the smaller communities and including here in the Brainerd Lakes. So those are just a few things going on. When we delve deeper into these three areas, we'll certainly be sharing more. So
Thank you,
thanks.
Carl. Holly, are you able to try again?
Let's try it. How's that?
Perfect.
Is that better? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that, you guys. All right. So I just want to say that in the room, we had representatives, or we have representatives in the other room from the city, the chamber, and business. One of our board members is joining us or joined us this morning. So we've got some broad perspective. And I have to say that those gals in the room have way more experience than I do in the community. I've only lived in Alexandria for about 5.5 years. So I'm really new to the community, and I wish that we could have some conversation and then give you some input. Even from the foundation perspective, we're probably at that ATM space that you talked about, Catherine. I mean, we are moving into that convening and facilitator space, but right now I'd say we're really at that ATM place with our foundation. So anything that I say is really coming from my own bias and coming from my own perception of this community. And so when I look at the three areas, the social offerings, Alexandria, I mean, I look at this community, it's an awesome community. We have lots of things to do, lots of social offerings. That's my perception. The formal and the informal for me has been awesome. So I love the community. The aesthetics, we're Lakes community. So people see us that way. But I've got some questions that I want to pose to the group around some of these things, that just to hear their perceptions, because it could very well be different. The openness piece, I don't know that I can even speak to that. We've been talking a lot about, DEI in our community, and how are we welcoming, and how are we making people feel welcome, and are we open? And I can't answer that question. I do know that for me, it's really been a journey of building social capital personally, because I've only been with the foundation for not even 2 years. So it's been, for me, building social capital. I love this whole idea of bridging social capital and how we do that in communities. I do know that in Alexandria, we also have a newcomers club. I've never been to it. I'm actually going to be presenting there in 2 months about the foundation, but we do have one. The chamber has a great community leadership program. So there are things that are happening here around all these areas. The foundation is, it's not something we're doing, but it's happening here. So I think for us, we're just excited about this whole community convening around this topic. So this is, I think, our way to really help start some conversation in the community. And I think we can, hopefully be a leader in that and bringing people together to have the conversations around this. So that's my perspective, I guess. So thank you. And we're not quite where the others are, but we're getting there. And I think it starts with the conversation and this great information. I know we all really enjoyed the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Holly. And then we'll go to Greta. And I know we had to just say goodbye, and we didn't get to really say a formal goodbye to Catherine, our presenter. She needed to hop off for another, or no, she's still there. Catherine, there you are. I know in a couple minutes here you need to hop off, but wanted to thank you so much. I think you're on mute.
Well,
maybe. Oh, there you are.
Yes, I have to hop off at 1:30, but I will make the slides available. Anything else you need, the worksheets, you can adapt them. And many of you have reached out to me already. Feel free. I'm still here. And I'd love to hear how it's going. I'm very excited for you guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll go to Greta to share for the Central Minnesota Community Foundation.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm Greta Stark-Crocker. I'm the Executive Director at the Central Minnesota Community Foundation. And we recently have been working on the Social Capital Survey. And one of the interesting findings that we found in that survey was the connection with trust in our community. And of those, the key of those surveyed, 85% of them at a high level of trust in our neighbors, our police, and our local stores, which, being from St. Cloud and living in this community my whole life, is really encouraging for me to hear that in that social capital survey. We're focusing on, another area we're focusing on is convening small open conversations in our community to build relationships and create bonds across our community. So these might be one-on-one conversations, it's getting to know different people in our community in a safe space. We're going to be convening larger groups, bringing people together across different backgrounds and diversities to have deeper dive conversations on issues like, what is our community, our place, our home? How do we make it our home for everyone who is here, and focusing on building social capital? I guess I'd also like to touch on what Dr. Loflin talked about with aesthetics in our community. One key example that we've had happen in our community was great. It was the St. Cloud Rotary Club. They came together. They took on the project at what's called Lake George in our community. And there's a little lake there, and they put in a walking path, and they really cleaned it up and made it a place that people want to come together and convene and be together. And they put on concerts every Wednesday night in the summer for all of our community to come together and be together in a safe place. So that's one of the ways that we're making our community a place to be and welcoming others in our community. I guess I'd like to wrap up what I'm saying, but by saying that we truly are better together when we work together. And when we work together to engage people, connect resources, and build our community, that's our home and our place.
Thank you very much, Greta. I'd like to move to the Wilmer Area Community Foundation. Sarah?
Thanks, Kathy. So we have a number of things that have been going on also in Candy-Ojai County, the greater Wilmer area, and many of them kicked off under the auspices of what we call Wilmer Lakes Area Vision 2040, which is a community-led, grassroots, long-term visioning process. And it's really, if there's an empty chair at the table, come fill it. It's wide open to whoever might have an idea or a thought for a project. They're looking for partners, or they think that they have something that could really be meaningful to the community at large. And around that area, that project, we've had 4 key focus areas. One being around inclusion, because if you don't know much about Candy-Ojai County, we're an incredibly diverse, we're fortunate to be so diverse in our community. And so we have an inclusion focus area, an engagement focus area, which includes leadership development from a wide swath across the community, so people can sign up to be part of leadership development. They don't have to be nominated by their business or organization or indoctrinated in some way to be a leader. If they want to lead, we have platforms to assist them and build connections so that their leadership can be effective. And then we also have a focus area around communication, trying to help people understand our community better, which included like walking paths downtown. We're working on a few other things around communication as well. And then around health and wellness, and trying to help build our community to be a healthy and well sort of place. So that has been a really productive platform for us. Probably the biggest project that I can really illustrate how WACF in specific has helped to work across these 3 drivers around social offerings, aesthetics, and openness was back in 2015 when we sat down and said, we have this beautiful park called Robbins Island, and it had fallen into some state of disrepair, and it wasn't really seen as this convening and connecting place anymore, but the community yearned for it to be that. We all talked with nostalgia about how we wanted it to be that. And so we were thinking about how could we build out the park plan, how could we do that work? And a couple of folks stepped forward and said that we have a need for a destination play space in the community. And they wanted it to be something that would draw folks from around the Wilmer area to come and play together. And we also wanted that playground to be representative of what is often a hidden segment of a community, and that is folks who struggle with either mental health or disabilities. And so we wanted our play space to be inclusive so that everyone could come play. And so we really kind of got a big group of big thinkers together And we decided we were going to build a destination playground at Robbins Island. And we were going to have it be a community design, community build project. So that meant we had to not only raise all the resources, but we had to find all the people who were going to build the play space. We had to find children and families and stakeholders in the community who would help us design the space so that it would not only fit in the geography, but it would reflect our community as a whole. And then we needed to raise the money to actually go ahead and build that play space. And we wanted that to be inclusive from start to finish. And the Community Foundation played a pretty significant role as the backbone behind that project and helped be the fiscal host and a number of other things. But in 2016, we actually built that play space just under a year later from the time we started. And today it is a 19,000 square foot, fully accessible play space on Robbins Island. And you can find it at wilmerplayground.com or on Facebook at Wilmer Playground. And it has, when we did that playground, we made sure that there were price points available that anyone could be part of not only building it and designing it, but also paying for it, because we wanted to build a sense that this belonged to the community as a whole, because we knew then they'd take better care of it. They would also be part of it. And over the course of a 9-day build, which was in sleet and snow and a heat warning and driving rain, it was like the post office. We built through everything. 3,792 community volunteers stepped up to actually build that playground. And their names and their families' names are on the picket fence that's all around the play space. And it's so fun to go out there and watch people stand there and bring their guests from out of town or their children who have come home for a visit and their grandchildren to go out to that play space and show them that space, because they have such pride in what we did together as a community, and the relationships that didn't exist before we started that playground have now blossomed into other social capital building projects. And that put $1 million playground in the middle of a place you want to renovate and rejuvenate, and it springboards all sorts of other projects. So our Rotary Club has borrowed the St. Cloud model, and we now have a concert series called Rockin' Robins that brings several thousand people onto the island for free concerts. And those things just build the next thing. It empowers a community to think we can do this. So there's some big swing projects that communities can tackle once they have the infrastructure and the belief to say, we're going to change that narrative, because that narrative isn't working for us anymore. And so that's probably the best project I can point to that illustrates all of those in a through line. But that project not only brought other things to that part, but those leaders being connected has brought lots of other good things to the community and helped steer our community through the pandemic. Frankly, there's lots that happened during the pandemic on the shoulders of those leaders based on the relationships that they had intact and we built intentionally while we were actually building a community. And if you go out there and see the play space, that's the inscription that we set out to build a playground, but we ended up building community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. Whoops. It's amazing. Am I yeah.
You are.
It's amazing to hear all the stories from our partner foundations, because it does, the stories that you shared, Sarah and Greta and Holly and Carl, really kind of illustrate the power when all three of those levers that Dr. Loflin talked about can really create connections, both informal and formal. So formal being those music gatherings, but then informal just with people informally using those spaces that have been created from the good work of the community as a whole. And before we close, I don't know, Steve, if you just with your involvement over the years, if you had any additional comments that you'd like to share with the group as well.
Hi, Kathy. And no, I think the only thing I would just simply say is at the base of all of these are people coming together, just coming together and learning from each other, be willing to sometimes go out on a limb and into an area that's uncomfortable. But every time they do that, good things happen. In the greater St. Cloud area over the years, one of my favorite people is Marnita of Marnita's Table. She taught us the value of coming together, of just having a meal together at times and learning that we're all not that different from one another and we all want many of the same things. But at the base of all of these great projects that we see across our region and actually across the country is when people come together, that power of connectedness, that power of trust. So we really appreciate what Dr. Loflin presented for us today, and also everybody else here sharing it. It's wonderful to see all the good things happening and the power of connections and social capital.
That's a great tie-in to our next session, Steve. And again, our thanks to Dr. Loflin for joining us today. And I hope all of you are able to join us and mark your calendars for December 16th for our next session. We are fortunate to have Bill Glazer join us, and he'll be focusing on how we create welcoming communities. And so I hope you're able to join us. All of our webinars are recorded and available for you on our website. And the link there is located or listed there for you on the slide. Thank you once again, and we appreciate your attendance and involvement and participation.